what's happening in Israel, and I suspect it's probably, probably the same here, that we've got these young doctors coming up who will be really pro, and probably senior doctors who say, you know what.
But there's the liability aspect as well, isn't there?
Yeah, of course, yeah, which is why you sort of see the young, and I think now, I don't know, but I'm starting to hear that in some medical courses, they actually are doing a day of cannabis somewhere in their medical training, yeah, so that's starting to happen. Mostly, it's you have to do it in your own time.
They never historically covered CB1 and CB2 receptors that are a relatively new phenomena, which doctors still don't actually learn about. It's only becoming a thing now. No one even knew about it before. It was never taught.
They do teach us about the endocannabinoid system.
Sure.
Which is, but there's still a big.
No one knows. It's like my other quote is sort of it's the biggest industry that should already exist because there's all this anecdotal information and evidence, but we don't yet have the tests because it's been an illegal drug. So everyone kind of knows there's a lot of feel and a lot of touch, but we haven't got so many facts yet. But the catch up is pretty quick.
There are other considerations though in different markets. So Germany, for example, they actually insurance is an insurance-led market. So for example, in the UK, you try to go to your insurer and say, hey, I got a private prescription from this specialist clinician who has said I should take this. They'll laugh at you, quite frankly. You're paying for that yourself. In the UK, you're a private patient. I strongly believe, and obviously I can't go into too much detail, but there are public-private pilots that will happen, and generally most of the best innovation within the NHS has come from pilots that are public-private driven. This is something that very few people seem to know about in the UK, but there are quite a lot of cannabis prescriptions. I'm not talking about CBD, I'm not talking about stuff that you can go buy off the shelf, which is not what I consider cannabis anyway. It's part of the cannabinoid chain. When I talk about cannabis, I'm talking about THC-bearing cannabis, i.e. psychoactive cannabis rather than hemp, which is effectively where most of your CBD product comes from anyway. I know of 21 private clinics in the UK at the moment that are gearing up, either are or are becoming cannabis clinics at the moment. So there are prescriptions getting written. How do I know this? I know this because MAC Life Sciences, which is what Fast Forward is invested in, we own a specials laboratory. So we didn't do a joint venture with anyone. We thought, right, we're going to actually buy an existing business that has a very good business in its own right. Most of its business comes from the NHS. 99% of the prescriptions that go through our asset Rockshaw are driven by NHS prescriptions and come from pharmacies all over the country. It's based up in the northeast, so again, it's a lovely story in itself, built by a couple of brothers. And another thing that a lot of people would sort of find strange is that we import 5 kilo tubs of ketamine at a time, right? 5 kilo tubs of ketamine as an API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, which we then go and make specific products that have been prescribed to patients. So these are unlicensed medicines effectively that have to be, for example, you can probably relate to this. We have autistic children who will only take a product if it's pink and it tastes of banana, right? There's no other way that the parents can get the child to take the medicine. So we, as a manufacturing facility, are able to bring in those specific drugs that are going to be in that, and then manufacture the product specific to the patient. Now, at the moment, that's the only way that you can bring medical cannabis products in. You can't just go, I'm going to bring in 10 tons of dry flower cannabis and say, hey, here's medicine, guys. The Home Office and MHRA particularly turn around and go, no, that's Schedule 1. What you're talking about is just cannabis. It's only cannabis when it becomes a prescribed product with a name, with a description, then it becomes a medicine, and it has to go through what is called a GMP process. And if it's dry flower, it also has to have gone through a GMAP process. Which is effectively good agricultural and collecting practice, and then GMP. And these people talk about GMP formulations. There's no such thing. GMP is actually a procedural system, and it's talking about equipment, and it's talking about the process in which you actually put together a product. So there's going to be a lot of marketing, a lot of ploys that companies are going to use to try and make themselves sound especially good, but there really is the regulation once you actually understand it, yes, it's complicated, as Jonathan very but it is really, once you understand it, you're just literally, it's like colouring by numbers, right? That's, there are barriers to entry because you have to, have capital behind you, you have to have people who can understand and implement these things. But, there are a lot more prescriptions being generated than we think. And again, Germany, we talk about 40,000 patients. It's more like 100,000, but it's 40,000 that are supported by either government or
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
yes, it is, yeah, and it's growing rapidly, and of course they have a very, they've been quite liberal about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And some people have said that, the likes of Germany, to a lesser degree Italy, is really just a quasi-recreational market. And there may be some of that is true. There are genuine patients there, but in many respects, I think it's possibly quite a good system because effectively the government is saying, well, look, we don't want to do that. We want you guys to check. You doctors who can recognise if someone's going to maybe go a bit loopy if they're sort of exposed to this, they're a good gatekeeper for making sure that harm reduction is in place. So, that's not for me to speak to, but it's just interesting when you consider it like that. Ultimately, what governments don't want is, the horror stories of people losing, having psychotic events, and generally that's because young people are getting hold of very high strength cannabis, or not even cannabis, synthetic products, which God knows what's in them. And again, you've got
It's been adulterated.
Absolutely, and what when we talk about the 60s and the 50s and people smoking cannabis back then, it was a very different thing than what we see now. It's cross-pollinated, it's been hybridized. It's a very I mean, we could talk for hours on this stuff, and I'm
Fascinating.
It's just interesting.
There's a question over there. Lisa?
I'll bring you the.
Thank you. This is probably more a question for Melissa and Leo. My name is Michael. I'm from City State, a family firm with commercial farms in Zimbabwe. Predominantly, we focus on maize and tobacco in the past. What opportunities or partnership or supply chain do you potentially consider with people like ourselves? And are there any capacity developmental measures that come along with that? I think, Melissa, you mentioned a few things that you're already developing, securing perimeters, etc., etc.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest issue I think in Zim at the moment is that we're still unsure really what the legal framework is going to be. I think the government a couple of times has said we'll legalise, and then they've said no, we're going to do everything as part of the state. So I think there's probably that question from a Zimbabwean perspective. I wasn't quite clear about what you were asking on security measures, but certainly to grow medicinal cannabis in this country it's really quite heavy duty and quite hardcore, and we're not there yet. So, but it does involve a lot of science. It involves a lot of lawyers. It involves a lot of security, yes, and a lot of standard operating procedures around security and around genetics. I think probably one of the big gaps in the lineup that I see of some of the African plays is really not enough focus on the science, probably not enough focus on genetics, yeah, and then also not enough focus on getting to GMP. So making sure that if you can grow a product that has the right levels of CBD and THC, if it's for a medicinal market, that you've actually grown the right product for patient needs, and then making sure that you've got something that the market, if you're going to export from Zim, that the market can receive. Yeah. Zim historically, great farmer. Zim is the heartland of growing for many years. So yeah.
So we're working with a farmer in Zim with a 40-acre license towards assisting them to get into the supply chain. And we've incubated 5 Black agricultural science graduates of the Agricultural Research Council of South Africa. It's the largest agricultural science institution, I would say, in Africa, perhaps in the Southern Hemisphere, with farms all around the country. And they, for instance, got if you buy if you go into a local supermarket here and you buy like clean peach from South Africa, it will be licensed by them to the farm. The Agricultural Research Council asked us to incubate these growers growing cannabis is been local in Africa for hundreds of years, and we absolutely can meet those standards. I would say that we should grow to dried flower using a nursery system where we have like a hub and spoke, where you make sure you get the genetics, but it's absolutely correct. Get the genetics correct, because if you can control the variables going into a supply chain, then you can control the output. So get the seed right, get the same growth system with slight adjustments. Just something to share, about £100 million investment's been made into a grow facility in Atlantis, in the west coast of Cape Town. The government of South Africa wanting to rush into the opportunity. And they're bringing in Californian grow technologies. That doesn't suit Africa. Africa doesn't need a lot of extra light. It doesn't need 100-pound lights because it's got so much natural light. So we'll get 3 seasons with just a little bit of supplementary light. But the grow methodology needs to be consistent. So we would partner by having guys come to BioDelta to learn best practice with the Agriculture Research Council, and then look to capitalize them. Guys, I think a recent report out of the States at a conference there was that $100 of marijuana grown dried flower generated approximately $38 of profit after the company's operations and production were accounted for. So that means from $100, $38 was profit, right? Now, what's going to happen as supply increases in the market? The price is going to come down, and the cost of production in Southern Africa, because of labor costs, because of abundant sunlight, and the lower capex costs, means that cost of production for that same 100 is 15.
I think it's fair to say that we all believe that the price metrics are going to get compressed over time, but for companies like ourselves, and I talked with the MAC hat on here, obviously that's what Fast Forward invested in. Contract growers are going to be a really important thing for us. We have our own cultivation piece, but ultimately we're not expert cultivators, so I'd much rather be talking to someone who actually knows what he's doing and delivers on time and has done it before. I want to focus on licensing, distribution. That's my skill set, working in like highly regulated markets. Let the guys, there's going to be tobacco, for example. They don't own all their own crop. It's going to be the same in cannabis. It's not a mythical, wonderful industry. It's a business that's run like a normal business by normal business people. There's nothing. Yes, it's a wonderful plant and it has potential applications that maybe none of us know about. It may turn out to be that when lots of clinical trials happen, it isn't quite as fantastic as we want. There's very few of the 100 or so cannabinoids that we know about. But ultimately, to get carried away with it, there are people who are going to do things very well. I think in this industry, people who do what they do really well are going to be successful because they've dealt with it before in other industries. You've had other crops that you would have seen price compression on, and you dealt with it. And
The Agriculture Research Council has been growing hemp in South Africa for 20 years. They've got 20 years of research, and they've got doctors with their PhD because of the industrial crop specifics. And what's interesting is that because they're government, they can work in areas with what would normally be considered contraband. So something that we're working with them on at the moment is the next wave, is to put a quarantine room and start working on psilocybin. So that we won't miss that opportunity when it comes inevitably. And that's at Wuhan's, it was Jeff from Wuhan that actually had the vision to predict that I think Denver was actually going to legalize it, and they recently did.
Yeah.
So in agriculture, Africa, very, very strong, more so than we believe.
Did you want to add something to that, Jeff?
I could talk for hours on that, but I mean, I think what I'd like to add is just simply that it is these types of things that it is these types of journeys that we have to take and have an open mind that maybe there's something there. And for me, medicinal mushrooms was something that I've looked into for a while. I haven't tried them, I haven't experimented, but I certainly have done a lot of reading on them for a number of years. And it just felt right at the right time when we announced that we were getting into that. And we do have a very special relationship coming up with the ARC that we'll be announcing shortly, which is very, very powerful. I mean, it's the things we're going to be doing in that area of medicinal mushrooms and medicinal cannabis, clinical research trials and stuff. It's just, for me, if we can find these things to help people, as you mentioned earlier, in not using drugs that hurt people, the long-term effects, but can actually find things that help people get through these issues. I mean, I can't ask for more. When I leave the circuit, hopefully I can look back and go, wow, I was a part of that.
I think most drugs treat symptoms rather than cure the issue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those drugs, opioids, for example, ultimately kill you. So once you get on them, you often don't get off them, and they kill you. So the original issue you had is completely irrelevant by the end of it because you die from the treatment. So,
And I'll add to that. I've had the pleasure and privilege of spending quite a bit of time with Hannah Deacon, who is Alfie Dingley's mother. And her story is mind-blowing. So she went through the whole trauma of her child, who was having 500 seizures a month. And she took him off to Europe. He had cannabis oil there, and his seizures reduced massively. He came back to the UK, and he was obviously not allowed to have his medicine. And she said to me, so he had 500 seizures a month. In the end, by the time he was about 6, like a year or so ago, he was being rushed to hospital 3 times a week. So his hospital stays were costing our country about £300,000 a year. The medicine at the moment is costing £50,000 a year. £25,000 of that is import duties. £25,000 is the product. And she said she got to a point in her life where she had to make a decision. She only had one child, and I was a single mother, and I related to this. She said, I had a sick child. She said, I'm either going to fight or I'm going to drive us both off a cliff because my kid is going to die. It is like, and I'm speaking very bluntly, but this is important stuff. She said, it's like living with your fingers in the power socket. The kid's brain is being fried. She said he is going to die between the age of 9 and 15. The Israeli scientists say, when you've got that severe epilepsy, you'll last between 9 and 15. She said the hospitals were filling my kid full of steroids and benzos. She said no one really knew what they were doing, and they were very, very dangerous. And my kid has got cannabis, and yes, maybe there will be some longer-term implications, but you know what? Between now and then, he has a much better life. So this is my point before about,
yeah,
and there's all this anecdotal information.
Yeah.
So we've sort of got to run these parallel processes, I think, we've got to run the pharmaceutical angle because we do need to understand what's happening at the molecular level, but we also need to understand that the whole plant at the moment is providing real, and is efficacious.
I think it's fair to say a lot of people are harsh towards pharma because, let's be realistic, pharmaceutical development has kept a lot of people alive for a long time. There are drug therapeutics that are phenomenal, but unfortunately there are certain classes within pharma does have a habit of, once they find something that's really good and addictive and gives you a patient for life, they're quite good at letting that continue a little bit too much without trying to find alternatives, and they do get scared.
There's a whole seminar in there.
Their businesses, yeah, that's a whole other discussion, but this phytotherapy is really interesting.
We've got time for one or maybe two quick questions. There's a gentleman there and there's a lady here.
Should we go here first?
Yep.
Hello, thank you all panel members. My name is Nazan, and I'm going to say, I think, a statement, but it could also be a question. I'm in the medical profession. I am a specialist in facial deformity and facial development. So I've treated young patients who've had sustained quite severe trauma to their faces because of severe epilepsy. So a very complicated situation to fix. So I'd like to just link that back to what Leon said about, for some of these families, it's a last resort. Lots of combinations of diet, pharma, management have been tried, and it's really a case of damage limitation, and there's a lot of hope pinned on anything new. So that's what I would like to hang my statement on, and that's related to the cost-benefit analyses that we mentioned with the previous panel and the efficacy studies. And I think at the beginning of any curve that we're at the start of here, there'll be a huge amount of commercial hype, of course, around anything like this. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of actual benefit, which we'll uncover one by one. We have to be mindful that you don't get a benefit without a side effect, even if it's a homeopathic, even if it's a plant-based, of which most pharma is plant-based, including opioids, and also anecdotal evidence and how it's controlled, and advertising standards agencies around the world and their role linking with them. And final point, I'd just like to make a reference to the huge controversy around pharma that we all know about. And I'd like to reference Ben Goldacre's work, who has uncovered the phenomenal amount of porcupines that are fed to the medical profession and the public.
What is the name of the book?
Bad Pharma, amongst many others. And I'd just like to sort of point out the courage that it takes to sort of uncover unpick the statistics in publications, particularly when there's huge commercial gain at stake. So I think we're at the point of evolution in pharmacology and medical science where we can be a bit more mindful of that, because ultimately, when it comes down to the individual, we've got high stakes when we're talking about severe epilepsy or kids or real medical purposes.
If I may, it's a set of statements, and some very, very good ones and some very apt ones. I think you're absolutely right. We can't go around, as I said earlier, talking about cancer cures and all this kind of thing. We talk about how we